Where did religion begin? I mean, it's one of the biggest questions we can ask about human history, right? For a long time, a really influential group of 19th century thinkers thought they had a simple and what seemed like a powerful answer. And that's the answer we're going to deconstruct in this explainer. And their whole idea really boiled down to this one question. Did it all start with people literally worshiping sticks and stones? Believe it or not, their answer was basically, yeah. That was humanity's first shot at religion. But here's the thing. Were they actually right? The theory had a name, of course, fetishism. The idea was that the earliest, most primitive humans saw, say, a strangely shaped rock or a unique piece of wood, and believed that power resided inside the object itself, not as a symbol for something bigger, but that the thing itself was the power. You can see why it was so appealing. It was a neat, simple starting point for everything that came after. But a theory like this doesn't just pop up out of thin air. It was really born from this unique, kind of chaotic moment in history, a perfect storm of new discoveries that completely changed how Europeans saw the world and their own past. Okay, so you have to appreciate what a whirlwind the mid-1800s were. All at once, geologists and archaeologists are finding stuff that proves human history is way, way older than anyone thought. Then, in the exact same year, 1859, you've got Charles Darwin publishing his theory of evolution, while at the same time, reports are flooding in from colonial territories in Africa, Oceania, and America. It was just an absolute explosion of new data. And this explosion of information led thinkers to a powerful new way of seeing the world: evolutionism. They looked at all this new data and thought, hey, if animals and plants evolved from simple forms to complex ones, why not human culture? Why not society? And especially, why not religion? They started searching for a universal timeline, like a ladder that every single culture had to climb, from the bottom to the top. And this desire for a neat, progressive ladder led them straight to the first big theories on the origins of religion. And guess what they put on the very bottom rung? Yep, fetishism. One of the main architects of this idea was the philosopher Auguste Comte. He came up with this law of 3 stages that he said all human thinking goes through. First, you've got the theological stage, where we explain everything with gods and spirits. Then comes the metaphysical, where we use more abstract ideas, like nature. And finally, we reach the positive stage, his ideal, where we just rely on pure science and facts. And this is exactly where our topic fits in. See, for Comte, even that first big theological stage had its own internal evolution. It had to start somewhere super basic, right? He argued it all kicked off with fetishism. From there, humanity graduated to worshiping many gods, that's polytheism, and then finally leveled up to worshiping one god, monotheism. Fetishism was ground zero. Now let's look at Sir John Lubbock, who took this whole ladder idea and ran with it. Using all that new data from around the world, he built an even more detailed one. He said humanity started with a kind of practical atheism, basically no real religious ideas yet. The very first step onto that ladder, the first spark of belief, was, you guessed it, fetishism. From there, he mapped out a whole progression, to worshiping nature, then to shamans and powerful deities, all the way up to religion getting connected with morality. It was a whole path, laid out step by step. So yeah, his model had a few more rungs on the ladder, but the foundation was exactly the same. The big takeaway among these thinkers was solid. If you go all the way back to the dawn of human belief, you'll find people worshiping objects, period. It was presented as a settled scientific fact. Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. Theories cooked up in European studies are one thing. What was actually happening on the ground? It's time to move from the theory to the cold, hard evidence. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Did the reports from missionaries, from colonial administrators, from the ethnologists themselves, the very data Lubbock was using, did it actually support this tidy little theory of object worship? First things first, let's look at the word itself. Fetish wasn't a local term from any of these cultures. Nope, it comes from the Portuguese word feitiço, which just means a charm or an amulet. It was a label applied by outsiders to all these objects they were seeing in West Africa. Things like animal teeth, claws, weird sticks, bundles of feathers, you name it. And here is the pivot, the moment the whole theory starts to fall apart. When people on the ground actually took a close look, they found something startling. This is a quote from P. Amori Talbot, a British administrator in Nigeria, and he puts it bluntly, "True fetishism meaning the worship of an object for its own sake, is absent from this country. Just wow. This slide really lays bare the giant gap between the theory and what was actually happening. The theorists in London and Paris imagined the object was the god, but the reality, the object was just a symbol, a point of contact, a home that represented a spirit, a deity, or an ancestor. The power wasn't in the claw. The claw was a symbol for the power of a spirit. And what's more, this wasn't some isolated, primitive stage. It existed right alongside really complex belief systems, often including a supreme sky god. So, with this flood of contradictory evidence coming in from the field, the entire theory of fetishism as the first religion really began to crumble. So, when ethnologists looked at all the real-world data, the theory just completely fell apart. They concluded, first, that fetishism is not an independent first stage of religion, not at all. It's just a small piece that shows up inside much bigger belief systems, and those systems often included a supreme sky god and ancestor worship. And here's the kicker. It wasn't even a feature of the most primitive hunter-gatherer societies. It was more common in complex agricultural groups. The neat little ladder was just wrong on pretty much every major point. And this gets to a much bigger point. It wasn't just the theory of fetishism that was wrong. It was the whole simplistic model, the idea of a single, universal ladder that every culture has to climb. Human belief was proving to be far more complex, way more varied, and a lot less linear than those 19th century thinkers had ever imagined. And that leaves us with a really fascinating final question to chew on. The theory of fetishism, it seemed logical. It fit the evolutionary spirit of the age, and it was accepted by some of the greatest minds of the time. And yet, it was completely wrong. It really makes you wonder, what other simple, neat stories we tell ourselves about the past are just waiting to be unpacked by a closer look at the evidence?